before we start, I would just like to say that some of our content may be triggering for some of our listeners and viewers. If you need help, please see your GP or check out our show notes for a list of support services. While advice is given during these podcasts, this is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice. Neither the host nor the guests of this podcast may be held responsible for any action or claims in any way resulting from the information provided.
Hello and welcome to the Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV, where mothers and experts tell all to empower you on your motherhood journey. I'm Dr. Jen and I'm really excited that today's episode is brought to you by my best-selling book, I Wish Someone Had Told Me. Unspoken truths about what really happens to women during labour, childbirth and the first few weeks of motherhood. This little beauty is the culmination of 1,000 mothers' experiences from when they had their babies. The things that they did not know about beforehand, but absolutely want you to know before you have your baby. There are a lot of things that happen to us when we're in labour, giving birth or in the first few weeks postpartum, and often these things are gross and embarrassing, or we think we're alone in our experience, but we're so not. And this book took me 6 years to research and write because, well, I had 3 kids, but I really wanted to list everything you must know before you have your baby, but you probably won't hear elsewhere. And I wanted to make sure it's medically correct because, I have a PhD and all. So some of the experience that are included in this book, I wish someone had told me that I may not be allowed to push even if I feel like it. Yep, that happened to me. Or I wish someone had told me that it would take so long to feel normal again after having a baby. Yep, that definitely happened to me. Or this beauty, I wish someone had told me you can have an orgasm during labour. Nope, that did not happen to me, but it is totally true. On a serious note though, I published I Wish Someone Told Me because I wanted mums to have this knowledge to empower themselves during childbirth and matrescence. And matrescence is the developmental transition from woman to mother. The personal experiences in this book will prepare you and they'll make you feel like you're not alone in your journey, but mostly they will support you in your mental well-being during what will most likely be your most life-changing experience yet. The good people at Powered by Fear Publishing are giving all listeners of the Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV 20% off I Wish Someone Had Told Me. Yay! Simply go to toughmothers.com/books, have a flick through the book, read all the reviews, and if you'd like to purchase a copy, simply enter podcast in the coupon code to get your 20% off. And as a special bonus, I will sign every copy. It works really well that today's episode is sponsored by I Wish Someone Had Told Me because this book is what started the snowball effect of what is now Tough Mothers. Tough Mothers was not planned or a business idea I had, and actually, neither was this book. Tough Mothers came about accidentally through personal necessity when I was struggling with my motherhood transition. And then I realised I was not alone in this experience, which is how Tough Mothers became what it is today. I have a really special guest on the show today, as well as a couple of cameo barks by my dog Alfie, so sorry about that. But my real guest of honour is my husband, Marcus Pearson. I love doing this interview. We covered a lot about how Tough Mothers came about out of my own personal postnatal breakdown and what Tough Mothers is and offers. It's a very deep and personal chat. Make sure you check out the show notes after the interview for more information. You can find them at toughmothers.com/interviews. But anyway, I can't wait for you to meet Marcus, so let's get into it. Hello, Marcus.
Hi.
Welcome to Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV. I'm really excited that Marcus could join me today because I wanted to talk to you about how Tough Mothers came about, and of course Marcus was on the journey with me, so why don't we just start at the beginning, which was 10 years ago when we had our first baby, and we'd done all the courses and we read books, and we thought we were really prepared for this baby to come out, and it was not like that.
No, it was like getting hit with a freight train, and if I think before the birth, just yours and my personalities, we were pretty prepared. We did a lot of research and reading, and I took my own little notebook into the birthing suite. I was timing contractions and making it all very scientific and mathematical. And we did a lot of I think really good antenatal classes leading up to it, and it all felt, we were ready. We were very, very ready. And the early stages, I think, of your labour were just like, clockwork. We rocked up to the hospital, 8 centimetres dilated, parked out the front. It was like clockwork. In we went. We were going to have this baby, and we hit a brick wall when we got in there. We didn't know what that wall was, and from that moment on, things were, there was a lot of information coming at you. It was incredibly, traumatic in a sense, and exciting at the same time.
I'm going to do a podcast on probably all of my birth stories because they're quite different, but Daniel, our eldest in particular, because what happened with Daniel was quite unusual, and a little bit, I think it was one of the first things I said to you after he popped out. I was like, I wish someone had told me that could happen. And so we felt a little bit like, I don't want to say ripped off. Maybe ripped off is not the right way to describe it, but considering we felt we were quite prepared, things had happened to me that we hadn't read about and we hadn't heard about and nobody told us about before we had our baby. And so as I got through, that sort of trauma and started working through it, I started speaking to other mums and sharing my story, which was not really comfortable for me. It was something that I really had to go outside of my comfort zone, because I felt if nobody had told me about this stuff before, then maybe I'm the only one. But I realized the more I spoke to other mothers, the more I heard that there are things happening all the time when women have children during the labour, the birth, and the first few weeks afterwards that they don't know about. And it's usually because they're gross or embarrassing things. So I started writing stuff down with sort of the intention of writing a book, but I just wanted to get the information out there for women, because so much stuff can happen, and I felt that it was unfair that things happen, we don't talk about them, and women don't find out about them until it happens to them. So that was kind of the beginning of the book I Wish Someone Had Told Me, which kindly has sponsored this podcast today. And the funny thing that happened after that, so I started writing it down. Obviously, I had a baby to deal with. 21 months later, we had Jake. Jake was a completely different birth experience again. And I decided that I was going to speak to some more mums, because I thought, well, if they're all so different, these experiences that I'm having, what's happening with other women? And I was really curious, because, the scientist in me just is always curious about how different births would be for mothers if they knew all this stuff beforehand. So in the end, I actively sought out mothers and their stories, and I wanted to hear all the things that they wish they had known about before they had their baby that they hadn't heard about before. And it was anonymous, so women didn't have to feel embarrassed. And I included them all in what I was writing in this book. But at this point, it wasn't even really a book yet, because I sort of, I wanted it to be perfect, and I wanted it to be a wonderful asset to the world. But so I was kind of procrastinating. Plus, I had 2 little kids. And then we had our third baby 21 months later. So 21 months later. And we had a little girl called Everly. And Everly came out screaming. And I don't think she stopped for 3 years. And I say that as, kind of lighthearted, but I think it's actually true. It's pretty hardcore when your baby screams constantly. And to Everly's defense, while she was a very noisy baby, she also had very, very bad reflux and chronic burst eardrums. So it was tough for her in the beginning. But I don't think it was as tough for her as it was for me.
Yeah. I just want to add from my perspective there, like you've skipped through about sort of 3.5 years there, and to give people an understanding of what really motivated you to write the book and to create the podcast. The 3 births individually all had their own unique sort of I suppose challenges, but we got 3 really beautiful, healthy kids out of it. So we're forever grateful for that. However, there was a lot of things that happened where we both thought, gee, we really wish we knew some of this stuff. What's out there? How can you help others prepare? I mean, with Daniel was a really challenging physical birth for Jen. It was like watching, honestly, I felt like watching helplessly from the sidelines. And I grew up on a cattle property. I've seen breech births with cows being flung around to get their hearts started. And I said to Jen, probably shouldn't have, when I went down the business end after Daniel was pulled out with a big set of barbecue tongs, which I think are called forceps in your world, with the foot up on the table and the ventouse slipping off, and he came out with his scalp detached from his head. I said, it looks like you've been attacked by a grizzly bear, and there was no pain medication. So Jen was screaming. Jake presented his own challenges. Jake was a really smooth birth and much less traumatic in terms of the actual physical birthing of Jake. But when we brought him home, we had a little emergency, which was really traumatic. We had, in the middle of the night, Jake was vomiting a green liquid bile, which when we phoned into the emergency health line, we were told to immediately get him to hospital, and they said his life is in danger. He could have a twisted bowel, and so again we were sort of like, whoa, and there's more you can add to that. Everly was different again, and that again not so much of a traumatic birth experience at all. I think you were a pro by that stage, another natural birth, all natural. But she was really noisy, and we had the three of them in the house. And it became then the actual brutality was the just the physical relentlessness of it. That all mums out there have to deal with, and it's silent. It's like, suck it up. This is just parenting. Was the kind of the how we perceived it should be. So whilst Daniel was kind of traumatic in the sense physically, the real battle began when Everly came. I think, when we were rudderless, and we were very unconscious about how to deal with the stress of sleeplessness and the volume of things that have to be done as parents.
Yeah, and because they were all, so Daniel, our eldest, was only 3.5 years old when Everly came along. So I had a 3.5-year-old, a 21-month-old, and a newborn. And I mean, that in itself poses a lot of challenges. We were in a city without any family around, and Marcus's father was terminally ill with cancer at the time as well, and he was living in another country. So there were a lot of stresses, which we might go into a little bit later. But Everly posed challenges that I don't even know if I could still put them into words, what happened with her. But in a very quick space of time, I found myself feeling extremely anxious, and not like the anxiety that I experience on a day-to-day basis, but like crippling anxiety. So because of her reflux and her ears, she hardly slept. She only ever really slept for sort of 20 to 40 minutes at a time, and then she'd be up again screaming, and we would have to settle her. And of course then my sleeping pattern became that way too. And it didn't take long for me to spiral myself into this chronic what's the word I'm looking for, over kind of stimulated,
and nervous system was fried.
My nervous
fried.
System, yeah, my nervous system was fried. Exactly.
You were fried.
I didn't know what to do, because even though the boys were challenging as well, I kind of managed it. I coped with it, and I thought it was okay. But Everly, it's like she pulled the rug out from under me, and it took several months for me to do anything about it. And I went to my GP, and I said what was happening, and I think she just heard 3 kids under 3.5 years, and they wanted to give me antidepressants, and there was something inside of me that didn't really want to do that. I mean, I've got a PhD in neuroscience and pharmacology, so I know the brain, and I know the drugs, and I know how it all works. And really, I should have jumped at it. I should have gone, yep, I know that this will fix what I'm needing, but I didn't. I felt there was something. It was like my brain was so fried it couldn't think, it couldn't take over, that there was something within me, like my soul or my core, that went, this is not the right thing for me to do.
Yeah, it was frustrating to watch. Having seen Jen just unable to sleep, waking up in the middle of the night. I'd often wake up and you'd just be bolt upright, just fried, and I'd think, God, you need to sleep, and you couldn't sleep. And there's a saying in the fishing community, when you see people that have all the gear but they're not catching the fish, and it's a saying that goes, all the gear and no idea. And I was like, here's Jen, and she's an expert. She's got a minor in psychology. She's a neuroscientist, neuropharmacologist, and she's just looking at me like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, do something, get some help, So it was really frustrating to watch you struggle and not appear to have the tools to deal with what was fairly routine stuff for all parents and mums out there with lots of little ones. They're not all going to sleep at the same time, and that's what it was. And it was,
I certainly didn't have any tools. And if you felt frustrated with what is it, no tools and
all the gear and no idea,
imagine how I felt. I'd spent 12 years at university studying the brain, and how it affects you, and here I was having no idea what was going on with my brain, having no idea what was going on with me, and certainly having no idea how to fix it. And I think not having any tools was one of the major things in hindsight now, I realise. But I went and tried to find some tools. So I went to this therapist, do you remember this? And she got me to do a survey, what do you call it, like a questionnaire type thing. And she was closely affiliated with a psychiatrist, and apparently my anxiety rating was very, very high.
It was right at the top. There was about 38 or 40 odd questions, and I think you'd scored sort of 38 out of 40 on the scale, which was off the chart, and need to be committed sort of territory.
Yeah, so she spoke to a psychiatrist friend, and they didn't just want to put me on antidepressants, they wanted to put me on antipsychotics. And that's when I really freaked out. That's when I really went like, I've completely lost control of my brain, of my mind, of myself. And but something had to change, but I didn't know what. So I just kept going, and I kept going, and then I got so sick in the end that I ended up in hospital with pneumonia because I wasn't sleeping. I was barely eating. I was like a shell, just carry on.
I remember really well because the lady phoned me, the therapist phoned me and said to me, you need to convince your wife to go on this medication. She's very, very ill and at risk. And of course, in the back of my mind, I was like, take the medication, get some sleep for us all, for all our sakes. It was really, compelling. But I said to the lady, I said, you're dealing with a woman who's highly educated in neuropharmacology. She's going to make her own mind up. And the lady said to me, she needs to stop Googling. And so it was interesting, and I sort of hung up on her. I think at the time I was like, "This is going to go nowhere," but I was really frustrated at this point. And I think you actually did take some medication. I think briefly, didn't you? And you didn't like it.
2 days, and it actually made me feel that even just the physical act of taking it made me feel more anxious. And because it wasn't congruence with me, I knew that that wasn't the right thing. It wasn't the right path for me. But then when I came back from hospital with this pneumonia, and if you haven't had pneumonia before, it knocks you off your feet for a good 3 months. So I was forced to take a break because, as we know now, the body keeps the score. And my body was like, well, if you're not going to stop, then I'm just going to make you.
Shut you down, yeah.
Shut me down. And that was kind of, I guess, enough of a break for something to come in, because I was on such a going crazy that I think even if what happened next had have happened, it wouldn't have happened. So I think next then it was around Christmas time. I was recovering from pneumonia. I was very, very weak for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I'll let you tell the next part of the story because you kind of brought the change into the family.
Yeah, it was Christmas, and I was off to buy some Christmas presents, and specifically to find a fish tank for the kids. And I was driving right across the other side of town, Sutherland Shire. Shout out to the Shire people. And went and looked at some fish tanks, and I was on my way back, and I pulled in, I don't even remember where I was, but I pulled into a small sort of village shopping sort of village area, and as I got out of the car, I was in the back of my mind, gee, I haven't got anything for Jen, what am I going to get her? You know, just always struggled with getting presents for you, pretty challenging to buy for, and I'd usually get something last minute, some sort of jewellery or something like this, but I was a little stuck, and jumped out of the car, and across the road was this shop which you know, I would describe as a hippie shop where they sold strange things like crystals and dream catchers, and you know, and I was certainly, I just wasn't, I was completely naive, I guess, to the spiritual world, and you know, Jen grew up in Byron Bay and sort of was almost like, you know, I'm a scientist, so we
sorry, for people that there might be people listening that don't know Byron Bay,
Oh,
back in the 1980s and early 90s when I lived there, it was very much a hippie town, and everyone was going there to find themselves or to follow a guru, and yeah, that was just not me. I couldn't wait to get out of there. Sorry, keep going.
so you know, the irony of it is quite funny, you know, that you were surrounded by all these things that could potentially help you unaware. So I don't know what it was, you know, out of desperation or divine intervention or something inside me was just sort of said, have a look in there. And as I walked in, I remembered a book that a good friend of mine who had lost a sibling had said to me, if you ever get a chance, have a read of a book by the Dalai Lama. And it was around happiness. I can't remember the exact title now. And I thought, oh, maybe they'll have a book by the Dalai Lama in this shop. And of course, I walked up to the counter and said to the chap, you know, do you have any books by the Dalai Lama? And he kind of, you know, looked at me, rolled his eyes and pointed to a wall of Dalai Lama books up the back, you know, in this self-help sort of way. And I went up, found the book, turned around to leave, and there was a DVD series box. CD? It was CD, yeah, staring at me. And it said, Living Without Stress and Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I went, ooh, that sounds spot on. Flipped it over, had a read. I'll grab that as well as an extra. 2 presents to give to Jen, you know, for Christmas. And so I went up to the counter to get the 2, and he sort of put the Dalai Lama book in the bag, and he picked up the CD set, and he said to me, oh, this is fantastic. Do you know who this is? And I said, no, never heard of him. He's brilliant. He's a Buddhist monk, very famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk. You'll enjoy this. So I jumped in the car, and I thought, well, I've got an hour to drive home. I might whack in one of these CDs and have a listen. And of course, at the time, I was going through my own challenges, and Father had passed away, I think, at that point.
Yes.
And you know, I was really struggling to process that and deal with that, trying to keep everything under control. And I slipped in the first CD, and this little gentle voice came on, which was Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was interviewing a journalist in France near his monastery, walking through the forest, and he was interviewing this journalist around some of the Buddhist practices, teachings. In particular, they were doing something called mindful walking, and he was talking about what I later came to know as mindfulness, but they were talking about it, and he was describing this process, and this journalist, you know, was thinking about how quickly he's got to get this article out, and I'm going to get back, and I'm in my hotel room, and all this sort of busy, and the you know, Thich Nhat Hanh was explaining, you know, this is one of the problems with the world we live in, is that people are so caught up and not conscious and present, and so these techniques were designed to, you know, to help people. So at this moment, I got this sort of suddenly incredible bolt of presence, and I started looking around my car, and I realized he's talking about me. This is me. I'm that journalist. I'm busy mind, thinking all the time, and not noticing what's going on. And I started to have my first ever experience with that, and looking at the steering wheel of the car, and it's a really nice car. And anyway, I got home, and I packaged it all up and didn't think of it again. And of course, that was the little opening when you opened that Christmas present that year, and I thought, I haven't really got anything much for you, just a couple of books. And you looked at it, and you turned it over, and you looked at me, and you said, this is the best present you've ever given me. And so we started to listen to these CDs, and that was an incredible beginning for us of an exploration into the inner work that we've done and into meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I listened to those CDs religiously. I lost count of how many times I listened to them. I even had them in, when I was putting the kids to bed, one headphone in the ear and stuff like that. Like I was awake at night, so I was just listening to them constantly, and it made me realize how driven I was by my head, and how a lot of what was going on with me not being able to sleep was because of the thoughts that I was having, and the thoughts were not good thoughts. They were about, around, am I doing a good job? How will I cope with, looking after my children tomorrow if I don't have any sleep, and those poor children to have me as a mother, and all these awful, awful things that I now realize are completely untrue. And I also had that epiphany where I realized that I think up until that point, I was always driven by my head. I don't think I'd ever taken that sort of mindful step back and been in the present moment, because I was always ahead in the future. And they say that anxiety manifests by living in the future, and so it made perfect sense to me. And we just avowed that, and it opened up a whole new world of listening and learning to other teachers, and then eventually also meditation, and Marcus and I separately and together tried various forms of meditation, but I found that a lot of the time they took a long time. And so when you've got 3 very tiny kids that need a lot of attention, you can't just have an hour to close your eyes and do body scanning and expect everything to carry on, because the chance of having 3 kids, I don't think Daniel was even having day sleeps anymore, but the chance of putting 3 kids to sleep at the same time during the day, every mother knows it's like a small miracle. So we ended up finding a meditation teacher, Tom Cronin, and maybe you want to talk about how.
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that we were onto something, and we were intrigued by mindfulness as it was at the time, and meditation in general. But yeah, we were getting up really early, and we didn't really sort of have a lot of access to resources, and we were looking for something that we could embed more as a routine that we could both do, fit it into our schedule, and explore this, right? And effectively use it, not just sort of dabble in it, but how do we use this as our go-to strategy for coping, for reducing the craziness and the anxiety. And at the time, I just decided I'd go along with you. I thought I'm gonna do this too, sort of thing. And it was just I don't know, maybe it's the way Google and Facebook work. That this ad popped up in my Facebook feed by Tom Cronin. Shout out to Tom if you ever get to listen to this. Tom popped up. I watched a little video on Vedic meditation as it was, and I related to Tom, and I bought his 21-day blissful faster deeper bliss program, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to try this, and I'll let you know. And I was really genuinely wanting to help Jen, and so I started to do Tom's course, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, wherever I was. And it was about a week in, I phoned up Jen and I said, I think I'm onto something here. I feel really good. It's effortless. I get it. I think you should try this with me. So Jen and I both started to do this together. We'd get up in the morning and have a cup of tea, do a meditation. We'd do it at night. Now that's a long time ago now, many years ago, and we both still practice Tom's form of meditation, and find it to be an incredible tool. It's a great tool. It's a great tool to reset and calm yourself down.
I would go so far as to say it is a must in certainly every mother's life, probably every parent's life. I think that the calmness that it brings to the mind when you are, you've probably working, or at least you've got home duties to do, and you have children, it's a gift. It's a gift you give yourself, a gift of calm, basically, a calm injection. And it's funny, I shied away from all this meditation stuff. The whole time I was growing up in Byron, I was like, oh, these people, I don't want to be near these weirdos always meditating, and you know. And here I was, I don't know how many years later, meditating like, you know, every day, twice a day. And it made such a big difference to me that I was still in quite a panic for a while. Like the anxiety, it lasted for a really long period, but I felt that there was snippets, like tiny little snippets of where I didn't feel it, and it was usually during the meditation or due to the meditation, and I knew that things were changing, you know. And then I became really curious about why this anxiety started and where it came from. So I sought out a psychotherapist, an amazing woman, and I saw her, and we went deep. I did a lot of work with her. I saw her every week for 2 years, and it was really hard. I cried a lot, and I investigated a lot, and for periods it got worse before it got better. But I had so much insight into myself, and I realized for the first time in my life I had absolutely no idea who I was. And certainly not who I was as a mother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So when I started getting this kind of clarity, I was starting to feel a bit, I guess, in inverted commas, normal again. I realized that I really think I needed to publish that book, because someone's got to talk about all these things that happen to women that no one talks about. Women need to know the things that can happen to them, and not, you know, in the book are things that would not happen to everyone, but there is a lot of stuff that will happen. So I made it a priority. I made it a priority aside from looking after myself. I made myself a priority first. I put myself at the top of the pyramid, and I now say to my clients, if you're not at the top of the pyramid, nothing works. It's like if you stack a bunch of champagne glasses in a pyramid, if you don't fill the top champagne glass, nothing can trickle down to the others. So you have to put yourself at the top of that pyramid. And I started exercising again. I made that a priority. I ate really good food. I tried to get good sleep. The sleeping thing went on for many years, but it was getting better. And there were nights when I would actually sleep properly. And I just started looking into myself and into my mind. And and so once the book was published, I had quite a few women reach out to me and to say, you know, thank you, and it was great. Now I'm a mother, I feel like there's this sort of real shift in me. I feel like I'm a different person. And I was like, hang on a minute, that's what I experienced. And I spoke to lots of mothers, and they all kind of said the same thing. And I realized that this transition into motherhood is something that happens to every woman as she becomes a mother. And now, many, many years later, I know that this transition is called matrescence. And I'm actually doing a separate episode on matrescence, but basically it's the transition into motherhood from woman, and it changes you. It transforms us physically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, like in every single way. And again, it's one of those things that we don't talk about. So you have this massive transition. Like, think about it in this way. If it's like adolescence, everyone knows adolescence, and everyone knows that during adolescence things change, and everybody talks about it. But nobody talks about this matrescence.
There's a word in there, you know, you've just prompted me in adolescence, lad, because for guys too, you know, I went from like lad to dad, you know, at the same time. And that transition was not exactly, you know, smooth either, you know, sitting on the sidelines. But you certainly put the foot down and really started to, you know, to dig deep into what was happening, you know, what's going on. And it's sort of, I was sort of at that stage probably being swept along by you, because I was, you know, I felt like, you know, we've got us into meditating, we're off, we're good. But it was really only the start, you know. There was so many changes going on, learning to parent, and watching you develop that. I could not help but be drawn back into it, you know, and that there was more work for me to do as well. which is probably not the subject of this podcast, but I think it sort of we've both been able to bounce this sort of off each other. I think, which has been really, really nice as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think so. It's been Everly's 6 now, so it was a long time ago that this all sort of started, and within the last certainly extensively. I mean, we started doing this around about when she was maybe 6 months old, or 4, 5, something like that. But definitely within the last 4 or 5 years, we've been doing this work extensively, and listening to teachers and doing courses and reading and learning more. And I also have really tapped back into my neuroscience knowledge, because I do know a lot about the brain, and I was just fascinated by the fact that every woman goes through this transition into motherhood. And Tough Mothers kind of came about because I realized that we're sent into this transition without a plan. We have a plan for everything. We have a birth plan. We have a plan for going to the shops. We have a plan for our holidays. But this massive transition that we go through, we don't have a plan for, because nobody talks about it. So Tough Mothers is very much about creating a plan that is specific to yourself.
Specific to mums too. There's a lot of focus on the child. There's a lot of focus on making sure that the baby and the child is doing well, and the mums, I think, sacrifice so much and can really suffer unnecessarily, and can get quite lost amongst it all. And I think that what you've been able to uncover in that time, and it's an ongoing passion of yours, is that there's a lot of tools and strategies and experiential learnings that can be shared, that really make that transition into motherhood a lot smoother and a lot more joyful for women than it perhaps could be.
Exactly. And I think there are a lot of women out there, because for some reason motherhood and suffering are synonymous. I don't know why. If you don't suffer in motherhood, you're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But with the work that I've done on myself, I realized that everything that we were doing unconsciously, of course, was changing our brain. So the meditation, the exercise, learning about ourselves, delving deep, all was rewiring our brain, or my brain. I'll talk about myself, because I had wired my brain into a state of constant stress, and so now I was actively rewiring it to create contentment within my life. And that was particular to me and my story, because obviously my brain is wired and shaped the way it's shaped because of the actions and the experiences of my past and what I've been through. And so Tough Mothers very much revolves around helping mothers take what they have, what do you call it, like in their pantry, what they have in their pantry from their past experiences and their actions, and taking those ingredients to make their perfect cake, to create the perfect life that is perfect for you. Because we are also different. We also have different ideals. What's important to me might not be important to you, but most importantly, we come from completely different makeup. And it's all about, it sounds so scientific, but it's actually not, about rewiring the brain. It's like you want the brain to do the things you want it to do. The brain controls everything. And so we can either, go through matrescence and let the brain take over, and you get what you get, and then you just sort of float around going, well, this isn't what I signed up for, and I love my children, but I don't really like myself anymore, and whatever the issue is. Or you can go on the front foot, and you can have a plan, and you can start creating your own tools and your own strategies to prepare your brain for this transition, so that you're ready for when things go off the rails, which now I've noticed often happens.
Yeah, and I think like you're covering a lot of ground there, and I think what a penny dropped for me when we went off on this non pharmaceutical route, right, to try and find an alternative to help a situation that we were in. And no judgment on anyone who goes down the pharmaceutical route. It just wasn't a pathway that we felt was going to work for us. So we went down this other route. But what I liked is as we went down and we were, kind of like, we were out doing our field research and applying it to ourselves and exploring different things, and you were getting some therapy, and I was continuing to educate myself and learn. That you came back to hard science, because I remember, we were bouncing different books and sort of things off each other as we were growing. And I remember when the term neuroplasticity, which you have since told me it's been around a long time, but instilling these daily rituals and these disciplines that we were doing, and you said, this is science. This is actually quite scientific, right? This is actually physiologically changing your brain. And I thought, wow, you're onto something here, And I know there's been an explosion, I guess, of material in recent years by some, phenomenal people that are actually starting to recognize some of the older, more ancient techniques and the more modern therapeutic techniques all have a place in a. And you mentioned pantry, that we have this massive selection now of techniques and things that you can deploy. And what I like is that you've kind of experienced both. You have this incredible knowledge on the scientific side as well, that you can bring that together to help explain and to help make the right mix and guide women into motherhood, and perhaps not experience unnecessary pain,
unnecessary suffering. And it's interesting, because I think for the longest time we thought that science and spirituality were in two different camps, but actually one of the most favorite things of the Dalai Lama is neuroscience. Yeah. So I think that says enough that the connection is huge. And there's books upon books of him hosting neuroscience conferences at his home, and where people talk about the newest neuroplasticity and how it changes the brain. And I think that we have this gift, we have this ability to change our own brains, and it would be a shame to not utilize it. And especially when you become a mother, your brain is changed more than any other time in your life, and it is a bit of lucky dip. You just don't know what you're going to get. I didn't know. I had 2 other kids. I didn't know that I would have a matrescence period like I did with Everly. It was completely unusual, and I don't think anyone else in my family has had it before either. It just came out of nowhere. So you just don't know what you're going to get. So you need to be ready, and you need to have the tools in place to train your brain to lead to contentment, so that you can't lose yourself in motherhood. You've got to make yourself so comfortable in this new role that it's a gift. The motherhood, it shouldn't be a struggle.
But it is, and that's the I guess, when you came up with it.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be a struggle as in like that no one should. It's extremely hard.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be to the point where you just go, is this my life? Is this it? Who am I?
But I think when you say changing your brain, there's and I think if we come back to why you use the name Tough Mothers, because it is tough, but there's a resilience, right, that you're developing, by implementing some of these strategies. You are creating an incredible resilience that translates into all areas of your life. And whilst it is tough, it's rewarding. It's incredibly rewarding.
But the work we do in Tough Mothers makes you tougher, which is also the double play on the word. So with every mother is a tough mother, because motherhood is hard. It just is. But you can create mental toughness or physical toughness or spiritual toughness or whatever it is that will make you tougher and make you stronger and flourish in motherhood. That motherhood ends up being an exciting journey with ups and downs, and you just never know what you're going to get, rather than a drag and a chore and a struggle. So that's why I chose Tough Mothers, because I just thought it was so all encompassing of what we are and what we can become. Yeah.
And change takes time too, and I think that's the other thing with I think the parallels between motherhood, transitioning from life before where, it was a lot easier and exciting, and, you didn't have to really chip away at something encompassing like motherhood, where you've got to show up every day. There's just no option, right? You've got to show up every day. You've got to get through these routines. And there's so many sort of parallels, I think, with that and some of the work that you've done, whether it be meditation or, with me getting into yoga and exercise and eating well. The saying that I shared with you the other day that I love is that, inch by inch, life's a cinch, and yard by yard, it's too hard. And so, these routines and rituals that chip away, that can lead to, so much more joy in your life, are very similar to motherhood, isn't it? It's the daily grind seems so hard, but there's not a mother out there that doesn't go, oh, but I just love my child, though, sort of thing. And I think just recognizing that and shining the spotlight on it, and allowing new mothers or mothers to be to sort of understand that it is going to be tough, right? But life is tough, and sometimes there's a joy in that toughness and that routine. And but you need to be prepared, and you need to understand that there are things out there that can help you deal with that more effectively.
And certainly the joy that you feel when you do motherhood is different to any other joy. Like this, I don't think there is anything available that you could ever consume or take that replaces the joy of being a mother to a child, or other accomplishments as well. But Marcus and I have decided that we would like to offer you the chance to delve into some of these tools and techniques that we've been talking about, and I'm conscious of the time, so we might not go into that now, but the whole pantry of things, and how the ancient Greeks and Romans and Buddhism and meditation and all these sort of things all come together, linked with the neuroscience and neuroplasticity and the ability to change your brain. And over the next few, well, hopefully this podcast will go for a while, but few months, we'll do an episode from time to time where we will delve into these and actually offer some practical techniques and tips that you can utilize, because they're out there, and you've just got to find them. And I guess, as much as I don't ever want to go through what I went through, I'm so grateful I did, because it caused me to look in corners and nooks and crannies where I hadn't previously looked before. And I'm actually getting emotional now, and that's where I found myself. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, what I what I love about what you're doing is that you're so passionate about it, and I think that you're going to be successful. You're going to create a community of like-minded people that will create something that's more than any individual. And I think, through sharing your own experiences, and that's what I think really this podcast was about, for people to connect with you, because you've been applying everything that you preach to yourself, and to see you, to go from where you were, and to do it tough, and to knuckle down and work through each step, each child, each challenge, and to flourish, is how I would put it. You're incredible, in a sense. And I guess the clue was in the PhD, to spend that many years, challenging years, grinding away in a particular field, was probably a clue as to how you would handle motherhood, in terms of coming out the other side. So I think it's just brilliant that you're taking that level of knowledge, that level of grit and determination, and putting it out there. And I know you'll be successful, and I'm really excited for you to see where this is going to go. I'll hopefully do my bit. I'm just the dad on the side,
You play a huge part. I couldn't do it without you. But yeah, you're right, and that is what the podcast is about. And I mean, studies have shown how much stories can help change other people's brains, not only because of what you're listening, hearing, and learning, but also because what it wakes up in you, what insights you have about your life when you're listening to other people's stories. So the whole point of the Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV is to share stories that women wouldn't normally share, because we need to talk about them because they're out there. And you know what? You think that you're different, and I can guarantee you that you're probably more normal than everybody else. It's just that people don't talk about it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's the key. The stigma of we all try and hold it together, and I think that stigma is definitely well overdue to be lifted. And I think if the one thing that the podcast will deliver is create a safe environment where women can share their experiences with each other, in the hope that others don't have to potentially suffer. I think it's just brilliant. So hats off to you for doing it. Thank you for letting me be part of this first podcast, and hopefully I get to do another cameo and share some of my wacky experiences, as well, being on the other side.
Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing the past 16 years of my journey of this life with me, and I certainly couldn't have got through this period without you. And I think that definitely you're a big part of why I'm here, like right now in this period of time and doing what I do. So thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.